in our midst. We are right on time at 5:15, which we're very excited about. For this next session, I'd like to invite His Excellency Taro Kono, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Japan, to stage to offer a closing keynote, but it's actually not really a closing keynote because he'll be sitting on the panel right afterwards to talk about the geopolitics of Asia. But with that, Mr. Foreign Minister, please take the stage. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good evening. Dr. Bremmer, the President of Eurasia Group, Mr. Nakanishi, Chairman of Government, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first congratulate Eurasia Group on this year's G0 Summit. Look at the incredible group of people here. I feel honored to be with you all today. There is an old saying, great minds think alike. But I would like to offer an alternative. Great minds need not always think alike. That's why today we came together to share ideas on many different and difficult issues. Today's summit gave us an opportunity to have meaningful conversations about geopolitics, geoeconomics, and geotechnology, all in a changing world. The world in 2018 is far from simple. The phrase G0 world, coined by Dr. Ian Bremmer and Eurasia Group's risk for 2018, captured this complexity very well. What exactly are the challenges that stand out for Japan now in such a world? Well, we are facing North Korea's nuclear and missile development. We are witnessing attempts to change the status quo economically and militarily. We see the rise of populism, and we are struggling with the decline of multilateralism. The world is sliding into a power vacuum. So all the more, Japan must play a larger role in global affairs. Japan must lead the efforts to ensure a rule-based international order. Prime Minister Abe won re-election last month, paving the way for up to 3 more years in office. His continuous leadership provides Japan with more stable and reliable governance. Political stability assures us that Japan can turn its attention to bold leadership as we navigate a turbulent sea of risks. Today, I would like to talk about how Japan views these risks and the role that Japan must play to stabilize a shaky international order. On the trade front, it is no secret that protectionism is on the rise. We see protectionism taking root even in countries that have benefited from free trade. Protectionism fashions itself around fear and is a backlash to the ideals of globalism. Let me be clear. Tit-for-tat trade wars make us all worse off. Any trade measures must be consistent with WTO rules. Japan was among the first countries to achieve remarkable growth through international trade. That is why we feel strongly about maintaining and reinforcing the existing multilateral trading system. We expect TPP-11 and Japan-EU EPA to enter into force soon, and we will try to connect TPP-11 and the EU trade system to create an enormous trade regime to bring back the United States to multilateralism. I believe it is not an exaggeration to say that we live in a world of disruption. The security environment surrounding Japan is very tough. The Japan-US alliance and US forces in East Asia thus play an ever more pivotal role in preserving peace and stability in the region. One of our biggest security challenges is North Korea, with its nuclear and missile programs. As Chairman Kim Jong-un pledged to President Trump in Singapore, North Korea needs to follow through on its commitment to complete denuclearization. We certainly have a lot of work to do with the international community to make sure this happens fully and expeditiously. I just mentioned China here. How we can work with China to tackle the North Korean and other issues is important for the region and the world. China, the second largest economy of the world, is expected to play an even larger role in the world. Japan looks forward to engaging more with China so that their power better serves to maintain and enhance regional security and to make progress on other agenda items, such as climate change, as well as sustainable socio-economic development. And it doesn't stop there. Beyond its immediate neighbors, Japan has been talking up the vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. Japan, together with like-minded countries, wants to make the Indo-Pacific an international public good for everyone, which brings stability and prosperity. There are three pillars of our efforts. First, to promote fundamental principles such as rule of law, freedom of navigation, and free trade. Second, to pursue economic prosperity by improving connectivity in a way that transcends borders. Developing quality infrastructure that meets international standards is crucial. And third, to preserve peace and stability, we are increasingly focused on enhancing maritime law enforcement capabilities, anti-piracy measures, and disaster response. Japan cannot do all of this alone. We must cooperate with like-minded countries, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, India, ASEAN countries, the UK, and France, and any other countries who share our visions. There are some new risks, such as malicious actors in cyberspace, as well as space debris and the development of counter-space capabilities in outer space. Among these new risks, I would like to point out lethal autonomous weapons system. Let me repeat. Lethal autonomous weapons system, or LAWS. Yes, you have seen a type of it in the movie The Terminator. It is a weapon controlled by AI, artificial intelligence. If you have read Michael Crichton's Prey, you also encountered a bee-like machine. There has been a global debate on how to regulate or ban LAWS. For countries like Japan that has a shrinking populations, LAWS may be a gospel. LAWS might replace human soldiers. LAWS could be manufactured with very low cost and help bring down defense budget. Laws could increase precision and limit civilian casualties. Laws, however, could easily lower the threshold to begin a war. Laws could be used in an ethical way as machines do not need to rest. Artificial intelligence makes mistakes, sometimes big mistakes. And laws always come with a terminator question. Artificial intelligence might start killing human beings autonomously. States with more advanced artificial intelligence technology might never lose a war against technologically inferior states. Millions of local laws could dominate guerrillas in the jungle. Terrorist groups may be able to get hold of capabilities for laws protection and use this technology for assassination, explosions, and threats. Some countries, however, have already invested heavily in laws and will not stop what they have started. It's too late to ban them altogether. Just like gunpowder, aircraft, and nuclear weapon, laws could be a game changer. So we, human beings, must come together to set the rules for laws and must consider establishing a verification mechanism. The question is, are we wise enough to do that? So, ladies and gentlemen, we live in a time when Japan and the international community must take on greater responsibility to maintain the existing global order. I sincerely hope that discussions here will provide valuable insights and guidance for our common future. Thank you very much.
You actually stay right up here, Foreign Minister. Thank you, Your Excellency, for this timely speech. If I can invite the rest of the panel that is being moderated by Ian Bremmer to the front. The final panel is Geopolitics in Asia Pacific. I'd like to invite them all up. We have Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister of Australia. We have Pham Quang Vinh, Deputy Foreign Minister of Vietnam. And we have Keiko Honda, the CEO of the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency of the World Bank. And, of course, our moderator and host, Ian Bremmer. Ian, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, and a fantastic group in front of us to address a very challenging set of issues. I have to start with the Foreign Minister, with what was an extremely G0 speech, especially at the end. I remember when that drone was caught some 6 meters away from Angela Merkel. A few years ago, she was on the stage, and I thought if it only had a weapon attached to it, that's the end of the Chancellor. And if any of you have seen that video that shows the drones that are able to assassinate, it's chilling stuff. I guess I want to ask you, when you think about these technologies that are already getting out of the box, where it may be too late to control some of them, and we worry about other organizations or countries that would be less ethical than the use that we would apply as advanced industrial democracies. First of all, do you believe that there is capacity for a country like Japan to actually take true leadership on some of these issues? And also, do you think that, China is obviously one of the biggest challenges. Can the Japanese work with the Chinese, as opposed to just with like-minded countries in the West, to try to develop some constraints? We've heard about a Geneva Convention on AI. We've heard about all of these efforts, but so far they haven't come to much. What do you think could happen?
Well, we have lived next to China for 2,000 years more, and we've been dealing with them. So why can't we do it now? That would be my answer. Whether we like it or not, we'll be next to China for the next billions of years. So no choice but to work with them. And, you know, if we're going to live next to each other, why don't we be friends rather than enemies? And the question is, how are we going to be good friends? As Prime Minister is going to visit Beijing soon,
As are you.
I am too. But at the same time, they are still trying to violate our territorial water. So I think we need to let China know there's an international order, and we have to live by this international order. If you violate it, you have to pay the cost. And I think if we could work together, it would be good for both of us. And as the second largest and third largest economy on this planet, there's a lot of opportunity if we can work together. So I'll be happy to take the responsibility. And now, after the World War II, the U.S. has shouldered much of the responsibility to get this international order going. And I think the United States is getting a little tired of that. And they wanted to get less on their shoulder. So someone else has to take up more responsibility. And we are ready to get more responsibility on our shoulder. And I think that is our duty to do that, as we have been developing in this international order. We have benefited so much from the international trade and international regime after the war. So I think Japan is ready to do that.
Thank you very much. Kevin, I want to turn to you and ask, is China, in your view, on balance today, a constructive or a disruptive force in the international order? How do you think the West is responding to it? Is it appropriate?
The secret to answer any question from Ian Bremmer is never answering the budget he gives you. Certainly explicitly avoid the question.
I'm coming back. I just want to let you know.
But I believe in being transparent about my perception.
Is that Chinese?
No, it's not. It's Australian.
Okay.
But it's along these lines. The key thing is that China is not a status quo power. That's the key thing. And I regard that as structural. That is, China has now got a critical mass in the global economy and critical mass in the global military that it matters to its future relationship with the rest of the region and with the United States. Secondly, has an ideational framework which is different from the post-war order in certain key respects. So therefore, those two structural reasons, we have a challenge. And therefore, for the rest of us who share the liberal democratic norms which came out of the institutional arrangements of 44-45, plus those who are also allies of the United States, we have a very practical challenge to work with China on their natural desire to have a bigger voice with the order, but without changing the norms which underpin the order. That's the essence of the challenge. And it is critical, as Kono-san has just said, that we don't just simply give all that to the United States, because the Americans at present are fully engaged in their domestic politics. They've decided to take a time out from the global challenges until they sort out domestic politics. Countries like Japan, countries like India, and to some extent Australia, and certainly the Europeans, have a responsibility to not just say, it's your problem, Uncle Sam. It's actually a collective challenge for all of us to uphold what we believe to be valid principles, valid institutions, continuing values, because these things are not permanent conditions necessarily. They came about through a very hard set of circumstances after a world war. And so I have a very simple view is they are worth therefore struggling for. They are worth therefore our collective efforts. It's not just what you do on a lazy Saturday afternoon once a month. It's what you do collectively, consistently, and with common intellectual and politically.
So some of these norms, Kevin, I mean, we see that they are eroding now in front of us, whether we like it or not only because of the Chinese or countries that are more competitive. You see this with thoughts about immigration and refugees, thoughts about free trade with human rights, you name it. I wonder, do you think, should the West explicitly be willing to engage in dialogue, not just about being inclusive with China that wants to change the system, but also about the potential for adapting or changing some of those norms?
No. And there's a reason for that. We actually hold these values to be universal and continuing. We can intelligently discuss greater forms of power sharing within the framework of those values and those institutions. But if you surrender values and simply wave a white flag, let me tell you, there's a bunch of countries who walk in the door and say, well, thank you very much, goodbye. So that should not be our position. I think there's far too much defeatism and far too much passive behaviour across what I would describe as the collective West. Sure, our democracies have internal contradictions, and they have weaknesses, and they're being exploited by populist forces. But against the alternative, democratic frameworks of government are effective and efficient over time. The same too with the values of the international order. You just mentioned elements of the order under challenge. I think it's absolutely nuts that the United States has withdrawn from the Human Rights Commission in Geneva, because that makes it so much easier for countries which do not share the principles embodied in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 to say, well, Uncle Sam walked away, therefore that's the end of the human rights regime. It's that sort of effort that we have to be concertedly engaged as well.
A more challenging conversation, perhaps, for many in Southeast Asia to have these days, Vice Minister, given the economic realities as well as security realities that are changing quite quickly for your country and for others. How do you address that? Where do you think the principal challenges are in your backyard?
Actually, I think the first thing is that both the two major powers that are considered throughout this day, China and the US, they have been part of this region and their engagement are vital. But also their interactions also have ramifications for this region. So for us smaller countries, especially members of the ASEAN group, we want an environment that major powers and small powers will also have a role to play to contribute for the rule-based order, as the Minister has mentioned in his keynote speech today. And I think that there are challenges and opportunities on the US engagement in the region and also the rise of China. So how we together manage that is in favor of the region's environment for peace and prosperity is very much important. So I think that bilateral relations will be very much important, but at the same time, multilateral relations will be very much equally important. So we have evolving regional architecture in the region, including processes initiated by the ASEAN countries, should be part and parcel of all these efforts. So every player has a role to play here, ASEAN or Japan or Australia or India. And I think that we need to work together, engage with China, with the US. We know that there are changes or priorities and approaches by major powers with regard to the external relations. But at the same time, there are interconnected interests between these major powers and the region, and we can do a lot. So I think the different regional initiatives, including the Indo-Pacific proposed by Japan or either of the U.S. Also, the other initiatives by some countries, including what we are doing together with the 16 countries in the region on ASEP, the Regional Economic Comprehensive Partnership. That will contribute to some of the basis for us to work together. So I think we need to manage both the challenges and the opportunities. Good.
Now, your country, Vietnam, was said by The Economist to be the one that would benefit the most by a Trans-Pacific partnership that included 40% of the global economy. No longer does, of course. The United States withdrew from negotiations. Once that happened, did that change the trade orientation of your country in any way?
Part of one that I had to be back in time a little bit. Throughout the years earlier that I have to argue with people of the commerce. We have challenges and opportunities in participating in the TPP process. The challenge is how we can come up and meet the criteria, which is very high, required by the TPP, so that we can have access to the opportunities it may offer. And point number two is that Vietnam is in the process of economic reform and reform the business and investment environment in the country, so that can provide more incentives to private sectors and including also foreign investors. We have been doing with the Americans, with Australians, and especially with the Japanese. So this is for our interest. We are reforming ourselves to be good. So the TPP is a miss, but efforts for the remaining countries for the CPTPP is very much an important part of the process that is in line with our policy, including for regional integration, including for domestic reform. So we thank all the countries for continuing and sustaining the efforts that has been done in the TPP process in another form, the CPTPP, and Japan's leading role with this one. So for us, we will continue our reform and regional integration.
So,
Can I put
sure, Kevin, sure.
Just to back up what the Vice Minister Pham said, ASEAN needs a huge voice of thanks from across the region, frankly, for keeping the whole thing alive. I follow this closely. It's uniquely Japanese diplomacy, which took the TPP out of the fire and went blew all the flames out and kept it alive. So well done, my friend. That's a really important achievement. And it may go further, as the Minister said, if you link it with the Europeans, then we've got something substantial. But it's a really good example of Japanese diplomacy reaching beyond its traditional comfort zones, doing it really well. So I just wanted to add that to what the Minister said.
So let me turn Honda-san, and let me ask, so you represent here and run a large Western-based multilateral organization. Obviously, one of the most significant new things that has emerged on the geopolitical landscape in the past years has been the Belt and Road Initiative, the AIB. To what extent are these to be welcomed from your perspective? Are they explicitly or implicitly cooperative with what you are trying to accomplish in India?
Well, you are, first of all, thank you very much for having me, and also thank you very much for a very interesting question. But first, I think I like to say it. The World Bank Group is not necessarily the Western-led organization. We have, World Bank has 189 member countries. MIGA itself has 181 member countries. That's number one. Number two, not only the US, but Chinese government, of course Japanese government, Australia government, Vietnamese government, everybody's supporting us. One incident I have to kind of tell you right now is we ask capital increase. Not me, but I think World Bank and IFC asked the capital increase as part of the senior management team of the World Bank Group. I also asked many different governments. First, I thought, this is a big challenge. But by the end of the day, surprisingly, many governments, including China, US, and Japan, everybody is supporting us. So this is, I have to say, a lot of people saying like a multilateralism is disappearing. I don't think so. I think, of course, in a degree, a lot of people kind of have to look at more internal situation since the income disparity is happening. So therefore, I understand that. I think, as a policymaker, you have to take care of everybody. So therefore, you need to shift a little bit more geared toward the dealing with the national issue. Having said that, I think some percentage of the effort, including the U.S. government, is still actually going forward to support the multilateralism.
So I still need to ask you the actual question. But before I do that, if we roll the tape back, I think I said Western-based as opposed to Western-led. In the way that, Interpol is Western-based. It's in Paris, but was Chinese, actually, led until very recently. So but to go back to the question, which is to what extent these new things.
Right, new things.
An AIB, China will say, is not Chinese. It's global. It's transparent. Do you accept that? Do you accept that?
I do, for two reasons. First of all, I think China can just do this by themselves. They also have a bilateral aid systems such as China Development Bank, China Sure, and so forth. But they decided to work with the other organizations, so therefore UK and Germany and everybody's in. In addition, number of member countries has been increasing. And more importantly, they actually try to shifting their way, including environmental social integrity standard, to harmonize, to work with the rest of the world. So for those two reasons, I actually see there is a good hope.
That's very useful to hear. Would you say the same about the Belt and Road Initiative?
Belt and Road Initiative is not multilateral initiative, and I'm terribly sorry. I really cannot comment each country's specific strategy.
So, Foreign Minister, you have just heard from the head of NIGA that the AIIB is a global organization. It's becoming more inclusive. It operates at a high standard. Almost all of the advanced industrial democracies are members, not Japan and the United States. I have recently heard rumors that Japan may be considering or reconsidering its position. Do you believe that to be the case?
We'll see how AIIB will be operated. And if it meets international standard, we could say it's a global organization. We'll see how it's going on. Belt and Road Initiative.
But one you would consider joining potentially?
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. If it's really an international organization, we might. The Belt and Road Initiative, I think it has addressed the issue of connectivity. And yes, there are great demand for capital to increase the connectivity through infrastructure. We are a little worried some of the projects along the Belt and Road may not be transparent or may not consider the financial situation of recipient countries. So Japan is insisting that infrastructure project has to meet the international standard in terms of transparency, economy of the life cycle, and we have to consider the financial situation of recipient countries. So it's a good, I think, way to address the global issue. And I think we need to work together to address those issues.
Now, you heard from Kevin that the United States leaving the Right Council very problematic from his perspective, something you want to see done. But you also heard from Honda-san that actually the United States and its support of multilateralism has been significant from her perspective and continuing. If you could see one or two things different from the United States right now that you think are politically doable, you think would be helpful to maintaining the level of international order that we all want, what would they be?
Well, I think the first thing would be a WTO. We both, U.S. and Japan, benefited greatly from WTO, and that's the core of the international trade system. And I think we need to work together. U.S., Europe, Japan are working within the framework of WTO to address the issue of e-commerce or digital economy. But at the same time, some mechanism of the WTO is not functioning smoothly. And you cannot choose what you want to follow according to your interest. If you want to follow the international order, you have to go along with it. And that's the basis of the multilateralism. Whatever is good for you, you take it. But whatever you think it's not good for you, you don't take it. That's not the way the multilateralism works.
So we need to avoid the shorter-term transactionalism that we're seeing around these issues. Kevin, let's go with a couple issues around the world. Kevin, I want to ask you one that I know you're close to, North Korea. To what extent do you think, there's certainly been a lot of movement on North Korea recently. Everyone's meeting with them, including our foreign minister here recently, talk about denuclearization. Hard to imagine that happening anytime soon. Do you feel cautiously optimistic about where North Korea is now heading? Give us your thoughts.
On balance, I still remain a little pessimistic. Certainly the political atmosphere has changed. In New York and the Asia Society recently with the CFR, we hosted President Moon during the UN General Assembly week. A lot of discussion, both privately and publicly, about where this would now go. But you've got to ask yourself a fundamental question. Given what North Korea currently possesses in terms of rocketry, long-range, medium-range, short-range, and the nuclear material it possesses for the equivalent of 30 to 40 bombs, depending on which assessment you accept, the very simple question is, what will North Koreans be likely to get rid of? You hinted at it earlier on. Maybe their least developed rockets, which is the ICBM capability. And secondly, that's most directly relevant to Uncle Sam because of the reach. So what I fear, and I think you have intimated, is that we end up with a concession to the Americans on intercontinental missiles, but that the existing nuclear weapons material, which the North Koreans have, remains intact in part, and that its short to medium-range rocketry is retained. And if that's the case, we, the other democracies within East Asia, still have a problem, because that capacity to exercise foreign policy and political leverage continues to exist. The final point is, but if in South Korea now we have a large political momentum developing in the direction of not just reconciliation with the North, but some form of almost confederation with the North, leaving the nuclear question to one side, then where that leaves us is with a growing gap between the position of the government in Seoul and the United States and its other regional allies. Now, I'm trying to look down the track in a year or two's time. That's what I'm most anxious about.
It is a deal that is short of denuclearization, but agreed to by the United States and the North Koreans, potentially workable from your perspective? I mean, the Iranian deal under Obama, which of course is gone now, at least to a degree, was very short of a comprehensive deal. It just involved one set of issues, but nonetheless was on both sides agreed to. Is that the right sort of approach for North Korea, do you believe?
Well, I thought the Iranian deal was a good deal. Deal on the constraints. Nothing in international relations is perfect. I think Kwan and I would agree on that, and Vice Minister Pham is that the kingdom of heaven is out there somewhere, and then there's politics, and then there's international politics. Maybe that's hell and purgatory. I'm not sure. But the bottom line is, given all the alternatives, the Iranian deal was the best that could be done. Let's not go to the detail of it. You could achieve an Iranian-type deal with the North Koreans. That would be fine, but the big, of course, qualitative difference is, unlike Iranians, the North Koreans already have the equivalent of 30 to 40 bombs. The Iranians are nowhere near that. So I do not think we can ultimately fudge this question. Can the rest of us in this region live with a North Korea with nuclear weapons and short to medium range missiles? Answer, from my perspective as an Australian, no.
Answer, from your perspective as Foreign Minister of Japan?
Of course not.
Of course not. Nothing short.
Nothing short of it.
Absolutely. So, also Vice was saying no, and you're farther away, but they still hit you, so that's okay.
The matter.
So, talk to us about regional architecture. How well do you think ASEAN, it's large, it's a little unwieldy, countries have radically different standards, very different kinds of governments. How well do you think is functioning? And is it a model for governments in other parts of the world that themselves are increasingly quite diverse?
2 points that I want to share here is that, number one, any regional architecture, it needs to be in encouraging the voices of all players, the region, big or small. Point number 2, it can provide an environment for partnership to work together on issues of common concern. So I think the ASEAN countries have been working with other partners, including the US, China, and Japan, Australia, and others in building the processes and be building blocks of our regional architecture on. And it is not everything, but it's something that is acceptable by the players in the region. And number 2, we, in the absence of the definite architecture for this region, ASEAN provide a need for an architecture to be evolved, and everybody has a say in that one. And another part of this one is we are in a region of Asia which is very diverse, as you mentioned. So we need to be bit by bit in creating regional architecture. Let's see if in the absence of the regional processes that have been initiated by ASEAN and that have been supported by other countries, then we will see a vacuum of venues and environment are working together. So, but ASEAN cannot do it alone. ASEAN provides a venue for working together with dialogue partners, and countries in the region like Japan, Australia, US, or China will be very much important in these common processes. People have been talking differently on how ASEAN works. How ASEAN works is something itself needs to be more effective, and certainly, and it needs to be acting with one voice, but that does not mean that all the cases will be that. So we are working together. That's number 1. Sometimes we have successes, sometimes we cannot have, but we created a process of consultations. But point number 2, ASEAN needs partners. We need partners that can support us together. Point number 3 is that we have created an environment that the major powers, if they cannot work together, they can work together with ASEAN. And on many occasions that we have already worked together for the different set of norms in the region, for the different mechanisms in the region, including the economic and security areas. And we are working with them to create different new processes as well. So I think for Asia, we do not have an overall or umbrella regional architecture yet. We are moving bit by bit by ASEAN working together with partners, and it is evolving.
I'd like to ask you, Honda-san, when you think about international cooperation as a whole, we see some factors that clearly are driving more. The integration of global economies and the migration of people and ideas that are faster and faster. We also see some that are causing less fragmentation of the internet, asymmetrical warfare, and the rest. As you look at this from your perch, what do you find the developments that might be most surprising to the audience here, driving more or less cooperation? Things that perhaps someone that isn't working as operationally as you are might not see.
Well, that's a very interesting question. But let me actually just kind of show one fact, which may be a little bit relevant to this question. According to the World Bank Group economist, Asia is the most integrated region. I mean, the region we're comparing with Latin America, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia, South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Middle East. Asia is most integrated.
Economically.
Economically, right. And also, Asia is most connected with the other regions too. So, well, I used to live here for a long time. Then I moved to Washington, D.C., and I started kind of looking at the things a little bit of a different way. I've been in D.C. 5.5 years, and then one thing that really surprised is my view from the Tokyo was, of course, free trade going on, therefore, you're not going to make everything here, whatever cheaper in Vietnam, and then good products, we have to go there. And also some parts may be manufactured here, we're just going to export somewhere else to assemble it and import back. I thought it's common sense, but it's not. One of the reasons, logistics cost of Africa, Middle East, and also some parts of Latin America is quite high. But Asia is quite different. Communication cost has been significantly improved a lot parts of the world, but Asia is exceptional. So this is one fact I can really tell you. But your question, that's a really, really good question, and I don't really have a very good answer to it.
But you just sort of answered it.
Wait. No. I think, Ian, I think I'd like to have a little bit of rights being only women on the panel. What do you think?
Well, look, I honestly believe that for you,
It should be the politics.
for you saying that regionally we have radical differentiation, that Asia's leading in economic integration and other regions are lagging, might imply that more regional architecture, that's where we're going to see more successes. Global architecture is going to be much more problematic. I look at Africa, I don't see them trading within Africa. I see everybody trading from Africa outside. Where's the architecture? They need to build something like that.
China's building some of it.
China's building some, but are they building it within Africa, or are they building it from Africa to China, is the question.
Both.
Do you think that, are there lessons that you take away from Asian economic integration that are successful that you think can be applied to other parts of the world?
I think this is kind of $1 million question I'm thinking about every day. That's why
this is my sad face.
I'm sorry, but also, can I just throw another fact? Sorry, it's not really, this is the answer I just like to come up with, but I think, kind of try to find the answer to this $1 million question. But one thing, another fact that I can throw, we have like 17,500 people in the World Bank Group, and there are a lot of interesting things coming up. One thing's coming up, it's Human Capital Index. This one we actually announced last week in Bali during the World Bank IMF meeting. This one is the index of 6 factors: expected years of school, harmonizing the score, lining adjusted years of the school, children under 5 not starting, probability to survive to 5, and adult survival ratio. Top 4 countries are in Asia. Singapore, Korea, Japan, and then the next one is a region, Hong Kong as a region. And number 5 is the first country from Europe, it's Finland. So I was kind of thinking about it, why those countries are high score. One thing I could really think of is the investment in education in those places are actually a little larger, and they started investing early. Japan's case, education to everybody, again, I think people here, the audience living in this country or the United States, thinks it's common goods. It is not. But Japan's case, I did a little bit of research to come to talk with you, Ian, last night, and it was just I kind of dig the information when Japan started to have this education for all. That was 1872, so 145 years ago. That time, GDP per capita was about 25% of that of the United Kingdom. And 4 years after the Meiji, which is a major revolution, somebody in a leadership group thought about it. Gee, I think we better invest our people, and then they declared education for everybody, boys and girls. And my understanding is Korean also kind of adopted something similar. My understanding is also Singapore one is similar. Unfortunately, I really don't know the Hong Kong system. I'm so sorry, I was so tired of that. But it's maybe affecting something. But Vice Minister, is Vietnam is also the same. Are you investing more people, or are you?
Say no. Say no for the hell of it.
No, we cannot say no. Suddenly, we
On this regional question,
20%.
on this regional question, and I understand, well back into the policy questions like the sharp ones that you're throwing. I don't represent anybody, so I can say what I like. The regional question in terms of its impact on economic development is fascinating, I think, at 3 levels. As Kono said before, the existence of infrastructure and the existence of connectivity, the existence of the logistics is a precondition. Secondly, reasonably open trade and investment arrangements. And thirdly, too much residual geopolitical risk. You get those things lined up, and then you actually produce major economic outcomes. I think one of the big case studies of how that's worked is let's call it the economic sub-regions of Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia. Let's take Southeast Asia and ASEAN. Everyone criticises ASEAN these days. I'm a big supporter of ASEAN, given the history. Here you have 10 states which are largely at war with each other. Remember, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia to start with. Then it was against Communist Indochina. And now it's one entity. And it's actually transformed politics of Southeast Asia to a very large extent. Contrast that to the Middle East. You have no regional organisation which brings together the Arabs, the Israelis, let alone the Iranians. If you look at connectivity...
Well, and even the GCC is kind of broken, so yeah.
Yeah, if you look at even the sub-groupings of the GCC, but you go across that region, it is a classic example of what happens in terms of non-economic integration in the absence of a political framework to try and make it happen. Now, the ASEAN miracle didn't happen in 1968 after they established ASEAN in 1967. It took about 20 years, frankly, to unfold. But it's a great case study of what can happen, and I think is applicable to other regions.
So I think what this brings to my mind, both what Kevin just said and what Honda just said, is that in environments where you are expressing your power primarily through economics, development, integration, and the rest, the potential to actually not only sustainably build your economy, but also ensure better integration is higher. In that regard, I wonder if you think right decision for Abe to continue to move tax reform, economic issues, take the constitutional reform, building the military, push that onto the back burner. Does that make more sense for the Japanese system of the world?
Well, I think right now economy matters to Asia and to Japan. And I think it makes sense to take up their economic issues up front and then tackle whatever we have. We could talk about constitution, we could talk about politics, we could talk about whatever. But what matters is the economy at the end of the day. And in order to get the economy going, we need to provide good security. So we need to create a security system, and which we did with the United States. Prime Minister Yoshida decided to go along with the United States and the alliance, and that has been working very well for Japan. And that's why we could focus on the economy. And Asia, with ASEAN and non-intervention policy of the ASEAN, they can focus on the economy. I mean, if you look at Latin America, many of them have a democracy. And if you look at the ASEAN countries, well, some countries are under communist rule, some are under the military, some has democracy, some has monarchy. And whatever the political forms are in ASEAN, I think the connectivity and economic integration, that's what matters, I guess, at the end of the day.
Certainly the U.S. and Japan have maintained a very strong security relationship, and I haven't really seen that change despite the Trump becoming president. The economic ties, of course, have been a little bit more challenging over the past couple of years. You seem to have navigated them so far relatively well. Talk to us a little bit. I know the group here is quite interested in how you were able to, recent meeting with Trump on the sidelines of the United Nations, not going to see automotive tariffs against the Japanese, opening up trade negotiations. Where do you think that goes? How were you able to get that over the line? Do you actually see a meaningful new trade agreement coming soon between the U.S. and Japan?
Well, it's more like rulemaking by Japan and the United States for the new era. I mean, if you talk about U.S. and Japan, yes, there is a trade deficit in U.S. side. But if Japan and the Japanese companies in the United States, because Japanese company in the United States export more than the amount of the trade deficit between two countries. So Japan and the Japanese company in the U.S. actually create a trade surplus for the United States. And the best way to alleviate the problem between two countries is not the tariff, but to create a better environment for investment. So if Japan increases investment in the United States, that will create jobs and export out of the United States. And what we are trying to do is how we can create a better environment so that we can invest in the United States, they can invest in Japan. It's not just an agreement on trade, and that's what we are talking about. And if we're successful, maybe we can create another layer on top of TPP.
So, I mean, Trump is so frequently criticized as being someone who wants to break the rules. Do you think that on this, that it's appropriate for the Japanese to try to promote both the U.S. and Japan presently as trying to actually make additional rules?
I think so. The relationship between U.S. and Japan is not just the Prime Minister and the President are good golf buddies. You know, the President...
Well, they are.
Well, they are. They are, and they... What? Golf helps. I'm not a good golf player, unfortunately. Not only they are the good buddies, but we have layer of personal relationships, starting from President and Prime Minister, baseball players, business community, even, I say, Yakuza and Mafia has a joint venture. And
That's the first time I've heard that, actually.
So, even President Trump sometimes criticizes whatever. I think the base of this alliance is very strong and very lasting. So I have no worry about making any deals, making any negotiation with the United States for the future.
Kevin, what do you think can be done to strengthen alliances, alignments among the West, especially in this part of the world. We heard about the pivot to Asia. We don't hear about it anymore. Now the big term is Indo-Pacific. Very exciting to be talking about bringing India in. Not a lot of people know exactly what that means. Where do you think the road for success for better integration for the West lies?
Well, probably to get you to stop using the word West in Asia, because we're in the East. That's not the first step to follow what Honda said. Over in this hemisphere, we don't use that term. We're allies of the United States, or we're strategic partners with the United States, and we adhere to common sets of principles. But if you look at these relationships, I think there's one thing which Colonel has just touched on, the constant reinvestment in intergenerational capital, which underpins these relationships. Like the wartime, post-wartime generation reached a series of arrangements largely in the 50s. And it's been through generations since then. But we've always got to have a mind towards how this reinvested again for the generations which come. It doesn't happen automatically. It has to be done at all levels of society and the economy and security as well, with our respective militaries. Then the second question is, aside from bilateral arrangements with the United States, what do you then do plurilaterally with each other? And so when I've been in office, we started working on a series of 2+2 arrangements with the Japanese, 2+2 arrangements with the South Koreans, which frankly didn't exist before, and most recently 2+2 arrangements with the Indians. Each of these is frankly a new addition to what was originally agreed as a set of uniquely bilateral security alliances with the United States. So that's a process which is underway, and it will yield fruit in time. You cannot push the speed of it too far. It's naturally evolving. I think the final thing to say about the United States is simply this. I think you're right to say that the older alliances in Asia, like with Japan and with Australia, it doesn't really matter who's in the White House for a while. These things will survive and strengthen over time. But the United States has to address one core strategic gap, and that is the size of China's economic footprint in the East Asian hemisphere is huge. The size of the economic footprint of the United States in the East Asian hemisphere is declining in relative terms. And when you look at the immediacy, despite all of its shortcomings of the Belt and Road Initiative, there's somewhere between $1 and $3 trillion worth of cash on the table to do infrastructure investments, good, bad, or indifferent. And in response to that, we have $1.50 from the United States. We have a capital replenishment of the World Bank. That's good. I was in Washington the week talking to Kristalina Georgieva about the amount of that capital reinjection. But if you look at the total balance sheet available there, what is available apparently through the BRI, it's like this. That's before you get to the US bilateral measures. So if America is serious, put your money where your mouth is in terms of the future of America in Asia. Investment, trade, capital flows, but also public vehicles to answer the equivalent of what China's now doing with the BRI. Japan has done something along these lines, and I commend the Japanese government for doing it. But if you want real strengthening, it's to deal with your strategic weakness, which is the fact that the relative size of these economic footprints is changing rapidly and changing fundamentally in China's favour.
I mean, clearly the political willingness to write big checks from the United States outside on long-term strategic projects is de minimis from a public perspective, and that is clearly one of the challenges, there's no question.
Vice President Pence can deliver a speech about the new strategic competition with China. That's terrific. But Vice President Pence and Australia need to understand that it's not just speeches which change geoeconomics and geopolitics. We'll listen to the speech, we'll pay a lot of attention to it, but you've actually got to occupy that space.
Vice Minister, I want to ask, this is kind of an interesting question for you, in the sense that you have a political system and an economic system in your country that's pretty radically different from that of the United States, Japan, and Australia. Also fought a pretty bloody war, the United States. And yet relations of your country with all of these nations is actually pretty functional. It's reasonably warm. It kind of works. Are there any lessons that you could draw from that that might be useful for this G0? Other countries might be able, perhaps some of ours, that might be able to take away?
Certainly, there is a long history of relationship with each major power in the region, especially the United States. But one lesson that I can say is mutual interest, together mutual respect. But we need to find ways to overcome the gap of the past so that we can look into the future for mutual interest. Sometimes we do not see mutual interest in any way. But it's a long story that we go with different issues of the past so that we can develop more and more mutual interests. So, but we move up ourselves over the past 30 years or 40 years in our economic reform and also other aspects of the society reform as well. So we participate more in the regional and global context, including at the UN or at regional processes in the region. And we be part of the TPP process or now the CPTPP. So we need mutual interest, mutual respect within the context of developing bilateral relations. But at the same time, we have to move ourselves.
So, Han-san, you heard that Kevin said that the Americans need to put up or shut up. If there was one place that they were going to put up economically that they're not right now, you think would make a meaningful difference, what is it?
Well, I think in 2017, foreign direct investment cash inflow to developing countries is about 4.2 times of the ODA. So one great thing that the United States has right now is the strong private sector. And I mean, not only money, but they have private solutions. If they can leverage for the receiving side of the country, in these days, I think a lot of host governments are welcoming the private money. Then for them, private money is not that much different from the public money. So if U.S. government is going to promote and navigate more U.S. private sector going into those countries, infrastructure, school, healthcare service, I think that makes sense.
So before we close, to the Foreign Minister, one of the things that you said that I found most welcome, and I'm sure everyone in the room here did as well, was that you truly believe that Japan can play a much more significant leadership role today on the global stage. Next year, when we're here at the G0 Summit, and hopefully you come back and address us, what is the thing that we can say that Japan has done, that they haven't done yet, that you believe will make a difference?
I'll think about it until next year.
Great.
Should I leave you with that? Is that okay?
Well, my advice to Constance at the beginning of our discussion was never accept a Bremmer question unless you challenge it. So you can blame me for the minister.
Doesn't have to be one big thing. How about where's the area that you think the Japanese are going to make much more of a mark going forward?
Well, as Foreign Minister, if you look at the Japanese diplomacy, we don't have any military forces to use, and our ODA has been cut in half. So we have to use their real diplomatic power, whatever that is. Japan has been sort of hiding behind the United States, hiding behind the amount of ODA. We never seriously tried to engage in political dimension in global issues. And now we have to work naked. We don't have military, we don't have money. So we really have to engage in geopolitics of this international community. And that's how we are training ourselves. And we are hosting G20 next year, and we're going to be participating in more of these international issues and see how much we can actually engage politically in those regional and international issues. That's something I'm trying right now.
Thank you very much for that. We wish you luck.
Thank you.
And
We need a
success.
lot of it.
And we also, of course, thank you for saying you're going to come back here next year to tell us the answer to that question. That was very much appreciated. I'll take that as a commitment. With that, it's clearly time for drinking in the reception. Thank you so much to my panelists for such a wonderful tour de raison. And we will all see you in the other room. Please join me in giving them a hand. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this portion. We'll be going to the reception. Governor Koike of Tokyo will be speaking in English, so if you need a headset, please take it with you to the next room. If I can ask you to remain seated while we get our panelists out of the room to head to reception, given the tight schedule, that would be appreciated. Thank you very much.